Again, how's that?
Yes.
How's everything going?
Yes, so it's all good. Not too bad. I think we'll definitely elaborate on what you've been doing and what I've been doing a bit more over the course of the conversation, which is nice because this is one of the first times we get to do this with a guest where they've been on and we get them on again. So it's great. But yeah, a lot's been going on. Close to finishing my degree. Been doing a lot of
Awesome.
teaching. Yeah. So yeah, lots been going on. Very busy times. But how are you?
I'm doing well, just keeping busy. It doesn't stop. It doesn't, yeah, it doesn't ever seem to stop. So it gets slower, like right now we're kind of in like one of our slower periods, but yeah, still even then it's still kind of, has a little bit of chaos in the mix. So no, I'm enjoying it though. It's been really good.
That's the main thing. That's the purpose, is to always enjoy it, despite how busy you will be and how you get.
Yeah.
So, how when will it be before you get really busy then?
So with college soccer, the way that scheme works is it's busy during the fall. So for Division 2, we can only report for preseason basically like a week before school starts. So our girls get in like late July, early August. For Division 1, it's usually like, a few weeks or a couple weeks in advance before, school starts. So they get a little bit of a early jump on it. And then I don't even know what it is for Division 3 and other, markets like of the college realm. But so we kind of get busy. Our busy months are August through December, you hope, because December is the last month you can go to with if you make all your postseason engagements and all that. So I mean, our season kind of lasted until like mid-November, early November. So we kind of went, we went all the way to our conference tournament championship game. So we had a fairly good season. So this spring is now all about working with the younger players, getting everyone introduced to, because I mean, when we come in for season, you're just thrown into everything, the college level, and having to play and learn how our system works and everything. And then, you don't really get to work on the little details because it is
Mm.
just, you get multiple games during the week and you get only so much time with our players during the week. So, because people think about it, coaching is, everything we do. And I mean, that's the reality is it's not like, we only get so many hours in the day with our players. And then the rest of it's, in the office working on things and preparation for games and matches. So, no, we are just kind of in the thick of it from August on. And, right, like I said, right now we're in our slower period where we are kind of working on the technical side and kind of just the little details, the little boring details, but important side of the game. So,
But there's two things that I want to pick up there. The first thing is that you said about systems, right? And that's great because I'll come back to that shortly, because I've actually got some questions around what systems are. So I'm glad that you've touched upon that already, because it sort of leads into some of my thinking as we get on. But when you said the details there, this is a big conversation that I've been having with my colleague over the last week or so. And it's something that is something that I've introduced him to, and it's by the works of Tim Grover. And obviously he was the coach of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. And I've listened to a lot of his podcasts. I've listened and looked at a lot of his works. And the one thing that stands out from all of his interviews is he says sweat the details, right? So when it comes down to those like little boring details that come into it, whether it be, looking at logistics for travel, looking at the analysis, looking at, the weekly plan to month plan to the 6-month plan, for example, they may be all the mundane things behind what goes on behind the scenes, for example. However, all those details do matter, because when those players come to a rival, then they're set up better for the approach to training. They're there to transition well, and that means all the hard work which has gone and seen by yourself and your colleagues, for example, you're actually having a bigger impact on them than they might realize, and other stakeholders, for example.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny. We call it the little boring details because it is kind of silly little things that you think you visited when you're like a youth, like a young, and now you're in college. You're like, oh yeah, like we'll be doing more advanced things, but the small little details of the game still matter, like weight of pass, like how you find outlets, like little things like that. Just little like things of ball work and passing patterns, like that stuff matters at the end of the day, especially with how we play. We are a very high press, possession based team. So like, when you do come in and, we bring in a handful of kids that are just coming out of high school and are now kind of thrust into playing the college level. And I mean, nothing can really prepare you for that. You just
Mm,
have to experience it. And then obviously you get the experience from your teammates, but then, like you're playing your first college match in a very quick amount of time. And that will kind of widen your eyes a little bit to what you're in for. Um, so kind of going back to what I, started with, like when we bring in like these handful of kids that are just coming out of high school, they might have not played this system of play or especially played to the intensity that the college game does bring. And I mean, our conference alone is very, very competitive. It's an exciting conference. You never know who's going to pick up points on anyone any given day. So kind of getting the kids introduced to basically the intensity as quick as we can. We got 2 sessions a day with them in preseason, and then they got weight sessions and different things as as the weeks go on. So I think as much time as we can spend on kind of getting them introduced to the systems of play, and we use a periodization chart as well when it comes to things like that. So we have our more intensive practices early on in the week, and kind of lightens up as the week goes on. And then, especially like in the midst of the season, it kind of lightens up as we get closer to a game. But no, I think the most important thing is this: the spring is so huge. I remember my first spring season as a college player, and now as a coach, getting the that perspective on things. The spring is so crucial, and I mean, from a coaching standpoint, I've seen it do wonders for so many players who were just fresh, like they are freshmen. They played a fall, but now they get the spring to actually really work on the little details of their game, and they come out the following season, the fall, and they're just like a completely different player, so much more mature and calm and composed in their play. So I think it's so crucial. And I mean, people don't really think about that, but I mean, it's so important to the game, of course. So.
and it's when you say that, a lot of people don't think about, the particulars of the game or particulars in our lives, for example, because as you say there, some players might mature, they might come back and they're focused and they're switched on and they've had time to
Mhm.
digest some of the information and the systems which have been deployed with the time that you spent with them, for example. So, it's that small time which you have available, but you've actually had an impact on them, and then it's down to them to go and take that responsibility. When it comes down to those kind of details and thinking about the systems in play, like I'm very systematic in the way that I think about not only daily life, but also how I approach football in terms of how
Mhm.
I approach coaching, how I approach teaching, for example. And I'm very conscious of the fact of how systematic I can be. And then I
Mhm.
try to have a good balance between both, because sometimes I'm too systematic. I'm like, actually, I should be enjoying my free time tonight rather than going, right, I got an hour to do this, I would do that, I would do that, go to sleep,
Yeah.
and then repeat, right? But it's also trying to get into a way where I'm trying to maximize my time available, where I didn't just sit there on 3 hours on YouTube chilling out because I was knackered from work, for example, not read my book, which I wanted to do. Now I'm behind with my studies, for example, right? So it
Yeah.
becomes a little bit of a tough process for us to get into and out of that mindset at times, right? But
Mhm.
when we have those systems, I think it's really important because it allows those players to take that responsibility and understanding you set them up, you've given them that time, you've had that contact with them, but now you're giving them the ownership and accountability to come back and develop. And then when you do get those players back, I suppose you can see, splits between those who have come back ready and then those who haven't come back. And when you see
Mhm.
maybe that might be a minority of players, for example, who are not ready. So when you do get that little group, how do you work with those? What do you do with them to try and bring them back up to the standard? Or is it a very um, focused conversation with them? Is it perhaps we have to review how you've looked at your free time, or is it a case of well, actually you have had free time, but we're going to consider everything that you've had over the past year? We understand you've taken some time to relax. How do you address those sort of situations?
I think it's important. Like, I think we're very good as a staff that we have a very good relationship with our players, and there's an open line of communication, and constantly meeting with individual players, positional groups, and everything. And I think the most important thing that we can address with a player that like up front is, what do you want to get out of your experience here? Like We have players that have ambitions to go play professionally. We have players that, want to just get their education, but they also want to just play the sport they love. And so there's two opposite ends of the spectrum. So kind of getting an idea of where they want to go with this and what all they want out of the experience. Because everyone is like every individual player is different from the next one. So they all want something different out of the experience that they get at the college level and out of their time in our program. So I think if we do have a player that might not be kind of where we thought they would be, or might not be taking over with maybe a handful of another players that have like come in the fall, had a great spring, and then they come off and they might have dropped off a little bit. I think just kind of meeting with them and leveling them, like, what can we do to help you? Like, is they're changing your mindset? Like, what are you wanting to get out of this experience? And I mean, we're very fortunate. Like, we have a really good group of girls who are all on the same page on what they want to get out of their experience here. Like, they want to compete. Like I said, we have a very competitive conference. It's hard not to compete week in, week out. And I think we're all on the same page in that regard. There are obviously players that might be a little bit more ways developmentally like ahead of others, and I think that kind of leaves a nice room for us as coaches to do what we love to do, and get to work more focus on an individual side, because some often it is group trainings, but it isn't always nice to have those little individual sessions as well. I know I personally I love a good individual session. Whenever one of the girls reaches out, I'm always all ears to know what they want to work on and where I can help them. And I mean, our whole coaching staff is the same way. We are always out with the players and working with them. So I think falling by the wayside, it's not a huge ordeal of our team, but just making sure everyone's taking over. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, you have to get out of the experience. What you put into the experience is what you get out of it, right? So if we do have players that are obviously investing that time, we know where their commitment lies with the program and everything. So.
And I love what you're saying there, because as you're saying that, I'm sort of reflecting on everything that you're saying, right? And I'm trying to combine that with teaching as well as the thing that I have. And I can think of many different students which are having this sort of situation, and letting things go by the wayside, to some coaches might be a huge right? But I see that as an actual positive, because I'm just thinking there, when you said the player might give you feedback and you're looking at ways that you can improve to support them, I think that's the whole heart of what coaching is, and certainly trying to develop players, especially for what they want to get out of the experience. And at the end of the day, you might coach thousands of players over the course of your career, and everyone has their different ambitions. So it's about those maximizing their time that they get with you during that point, right? But you might get a player who's really forthcoming. They have a good personality. They're really technical. They might be ready to take on more responsibility and all these things, right? So you end up giving them more time than some other players quite naturally, because they're very forthcoming. So therefore, you see an opportunity to develop them, and they're trying to extract more out of you than perhaps another player on a team. However, what you might see on the team is perhaps what you might call a sleeping lion, for example, right? So they've got this untapped potential, which is just on the surface somewhere, but because we have been limited on the time because of the systems around us, so as you said earlier on, you've got this limited time with them, then you haven't had the chance to spend more time with them, and to unlock that potential for them to be a forthcoming player. So it's not that they might not want to come forward, it's just because they don't know how, or perhaps their potential is just unearthed. And you might see that as natural course where they return over a year's time, for example, and they've developed with confidence as well. But I think it's real key there, as you said, for me, just reflecting upon that, for any coach or anyone listening, is the fact that there's so many different opportunities of potential within the team that we shouldn't just write off other players because some are more forthcoming or have those different personality types, or we spent more time with certain groups of players than others. However, we will over time get to weed out those who are very forthcoming towards their goals, and those who will just filter away because their other ambitions are starting to take over. So, they've been in college, they've had perhaps the ambition to become a professional footballer, for example, but they feel that they're not quite getting there because they're lacking the technical ability, right? So they've started to weigh up their other considerations, such as going down a different career route. So therefore, their other interests have started to peak, and therefore the original ambition has started to drift away a little bit, because reality of life perhaps is being the focal point of their evolution of thinking through their experience. So I think there's a lot which comes into those. But when you have a system which sets everyone up for that, and as you say, a staff which is very supportive, then it's great to work with the different individuals and different personality types across your team.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I like the reference of like a sleeping line. I think we definitely, have. I mean, over the course of my coaching career, I've definitely had a few of those, and it's been really cool to see where they've come from and where they are now, and what they've been able to achieve. And since realizing like, like that I can approach my coaches and work with them, and they do have high ambition. It's just a matter of just not having the personality of like seeking it, kind of feeling like, oh well, my coach has already like got a lot going on, which is the reality is like we're here for the players at the end of the day. And I mean, at the end of the day, I'd much rather be out in the field than in the office, just doing doing stuff in the office. So, no, I like what you said there. I mean, yeah, I like the sleeping lion reference, and no, I mean, it's just it's mind blowing when you actually like when they like kind of unleash that talent,
Mm.
and they realize that they have it with them, and um, can implement their our style of play in an instant. So.
And just to come back a little bit and focus on intensity, part of the way I've looked at coaching since the time that we had the original conversation to where we're at now. So I had some time out from coaching to focus on uni and focus on teaching.
Mhm.
There was just a lot of different points going on in my life. I had to give way to something, right?
Yeah.
So I had
Yeah.
some time to refresh, take some time back to myself. So I've come back in as a coaching advisor. I've been with my current club for about 7 months, and the great thing for me is I get to work with any age group that I want, and get to look at whether that be our under 12s, 13s, 14s, the 15s, the 15s girls, whether I go down to our under 7s, under 8s. So it's a real nice sort
That's
of
fun.
selection, and I get to work with all the different coaches. So the one thing which I'm really conscious of is every time that a coach asks me to go in and deliver a session, that they have their own style of play, and then I have to tweak my coaching to ensure what I'm delivering
Mhm.
is corresponding to how they play with their team. Because if they got an hour training in a week and I've gone in, I've utilized that session hour, and then they've approached their game on a Sunday and I've coached them very differently to their original system, then these players are going to get very confused. So there is
Yeah.
a bespoke package in terms of how I align to each team and each coach. But the great thing is that I get to bring my personality in with what I expect from these players, for example, right? And that's one of the
Mhm.
reasons that I get to work with so many different groups. So looking back upon the session I delivered in the week, I had a couple of weeks off. I've come back in. I've worked with Al 13s who I've worked with before. And my full expectation is high intensity all the time, right? So the
Mhm.
main focus of the session was just full on pressing every opportunity. Don't worry about your defensive line. Don't worry about offsides at the moment. Let's just focus on press. So I sort of had to regress their mindset, because one or two of them are just sitting back. They're trying to read the offside line, and they're very conscious. If they press and pinpoint this one player in, they're going to let a gap in between, and therefore the opposition has broke the line and counter attack, right? Which is great, because that's exactly what I want the
Yeah.
opposition team to do. Um, so I focused primarily on the team that were pressing. It's when I looked at that regression, I did consider the fact that these players are 12, 13 years of age, and for an hour I've expected them to non-stop press, right? And they're just
Yeah.
constant right for the hour. So I've already planned the next 2, 3, 4 weeks in terms of what I want to get out of this team. But that consciousness of the intensity and the impact upon mind and physicality will take a hit if I was to continue that momentum for 5 or 6 weeks, right? But also, my flip side of that is when you go in and you expect intensity and you have that in your personality, and perhaps your session at a certain time hasn't hit what you've expected. How do you get that intensity up to where you want it to be when it might be lacking?
Um, it's funny. I think with our group, the nice thing is that as a coaching staff, we all have very good cohesion and like our vision and our expectation for the program. And obviously, that's implemented by our head coach, Tasha. Like she's come in, set the standard of what is expected us to play it with. So like I said, like our system of high press and very possessional base. Um, that's something that I identify with as well, and it was important for me when I was looking at programs and everything, and talking, for coaching opportunities. That was something that I really wanted to get into, because it's very hard to go into a program and kind of not identify with how your team's playing. Right? That's
Mm.
very hard to like make that adjustment if you do not like how your team plays. So right off the bat, Tasha was someone I already knew going before I'd even been hired by her. I had already, had a really good relationship with her, and kind of had like, a little bit of a mentorship with her as well, from working with her at a camp. And So I think with, that cohesion, like while we are like we all have that cohesion, we all have our very, we all have differing personalities in terms of like our approach to things. And I think when it comes to intensity, I mean, I don't even think half the time sometimes we do have to get on something, don't get me wrong. But I think our players bring that a certain level of intensity, especially the players that have been, in the program for, you know, at least have a year under their belt. They know where the standard lies.
Mm.
And, I think our girls are very good about pushing that standard. And if they aren't pushing that standard, obviously they're going to hear it from us. But I don't think we've really ever had to really deal with it too much. I'll be honest. Just kind of getting the intensity where it is, especially in the midst of the fall. As soon as we start getting in, like that timer on when our next game is, it's not that hard to get the intensity up. Everyone's raring to go, get a game in, and it comes fast. Every game comes really fast. You go through, you kind of like build up the anticipation like throughout spring, and then you get to the fall, the summer hits, and everyone's doing what they need to do to get ready for the fall, and then everyone gets on campus, and then all of a sudden it's here and you're in it, and we're playing. And so I think the intensity, especially like this year, I think the intensity was really good. Compared, like even my first year, it was really good, but I think this last year alone, the intensity was constantly there in training. And I mean, like I said, we didn't have to harp on them too much. And I think the girls, especially from a leadership standpoint, like our captains and everything, like they also know where that standard lies. And no, they help keep it very high. So, and I mean, we're very big on we train how we play, and I mean that doesn't let up for anything, and we are very like just focused and constantly keeping that up, because I mean that's why our standard is where it is, and why we play the way we play, and we see that it works, and helps us in several ways when we get into the game. So
And do you think your system would exist without that intensity during a game, for example?
um probably not. If yeah, I mean, are you just speaking in a sense of like if we didn't have the intensity in training, like would it exist in the game?
So what I'm trying, so just reflecting upon, say you've got a system, right, and it focuses very
Mhm,
much on high pressing, and you've talked about that you're a high press and possession based team, right?
mhm,
So if you were to take out the intensity, but you expect a half press, so it'd be okay. We might just get into the space, we might press them forward, and then we're just going to force them back to play the ball forward, but we're not going to be real intense in the way that we're constantly pressing, right? So we're just
mhm,
going to take the highness out of it. But when we get the ball, we're going to be very purposeful in a way that we have that possession. So it's we might have 15 passes, we look to get forward to try and score. But the intensity is we're going to allow the other team to have the ball, and we'll just sit them off. So we're not having that much intensity across the game. So therefore, would your system exist without having constant press, 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 get the ball back, get the possession very quickly? Or would it be a case of, well, if that intensity didn't exist, you could just adapt the system, but it would still exist as a system somewhere? Because sometimes I think, right, my teams are very focused on press, press, press. I want to get the
mhm,
ball back very quickly. And even without the ball, I want a constant press. So therefore, that intensity exists a lot. So if I take that intensity out, then would the press work for me? Probably not. So I take that out altogether. And my second system would be to be a possession based team, and look to control the majority of the game based upon what our possession is. So we'd be very much an in possession team, whereas the other one's an in possession and out of possession model. So you can essentially look at two different systems, one based on
mhm,
intensity, one without intensity. But I'd still expect the players, I wouldn't want to pass from me to you at 10 yards and for me just to stand there and wait for the ball to roll to me. I still expect my player to go and receive that ball, and not to be essentially lazy because
mhm,
intensity still exists. So therefore, would your system exist if you took the intensity entirely out of it, or would
mhm.
that be a separate model, for example?
I think, yeah, for us, that cliche, like you don't want to adjust to other teams, you want them to have to adjust to you.
Hmm.
So in saying that, I mean, intensity and like the press, like don't get me wrong, there's days where our press is just not with it. We'll make that comment, as a coaching staff, we're like, yeah, we're not as where we want to be in terms of our press. And I mean, growing pains, especially early on in the season, when you are trying to introduce a few new players that are kind of in the mix now. They're in the starting 11. Some of them are freshmen, like that they're coming in. They haven't played this system before. You know, the press isn't there. I think we do try to still utilize the press. We might just change up our system a little bit. You kind of have to get a feel for how the other team's coming out as well. But the press is something that, yes, I mean, we still want to utilize. I don't think we would ever take it away because we do see success with it, and teams have had troubles dealing with us in our press.
Hmm.
But it'd just be the matter, I think, just changing up a formation, which we kind of did tweak quite a few times from formation to formation throughout the course of the season. The girls dealt with that terrific. And I mean, there's a few that we definitely have in our back pocket now because we saw that they dealt with it so well, even with very little training in it. So press wise, I mean, that's a huge part of our identity. That's what's seen us, have success. And so, I mean, that's something that would never go away. I think it would take a lot for us to kind of pull that for a little bit. But yeah, I mean, just kind of getting into maybe going about our press in a little bit of a different way. It might not look what it usually looks like, but it would be there for sure.
So now you're currently with a coach that you do know, and you had the opportunity to work with her prior to being full time with her. There's a
Mhm,
couple of other questions which I got planned around that, but that transition from your previous role into where you're at now, and by
mhm,
knowing the person you're going in with, rather than applying for the job and then going right, I have to adapt to this
mhm,
person if I get
mhm,
offered, does make that transition a lot easier for you when you were able to get into the program, into the role, because you understand what each other's expectations are. But obviously, that will unfold further as you get to work with each other a lot more, and you understand whether they're going to delegate more to you, how, give you more autonomy, etc., etc. So when you had that transition from your previous program to where you're currently at now, what have you learned from your previous one to where you're at now, and how have you evolved as a coach?
Well, first of all, my experience at Xavier was, I mean, amazing. And, it was just, I had a few other coaching opportunities that were kind of in the mix. And the biggest thing that stood out to me at Xavier was Nate, the head coach. And now he's actually at Kansas. And so he stood out a large part to me because he is so, like, he's not a closed door. He's so open to new ideas regardless of how much experience you have. Like, if like me, I was just fresh out of like my undergrad, and I knew I could go to him like if I had an idea for a training plan or something like that. And like with my role, I was more solely focused on the operational side and the player analysis side, so kind of like dealing with the girls sleep and stress levels, like compiled a little database, and that went out to the coaching staff. And so every day for training, we knew kind of where people were lacking and sore, lacking in sleep and a little stressed out for things. Like, there's so many things that can be a stress and especially a collegiate athlete's life. Um, so going from that role, and I mean, the people I worked with at Xavier were great. All the coaches, I learned so much, and like they were very similar, like in the sense of they all were like on this, like we were all on the same page, but they were all so different in their personalities, and that just kind of created a very like just very balanced group. And so now coming to where I know my head coach and everything, and worked with her in the past. I mean, I was so comfortable, and then I think the biggest thing that I talk about is I was not doing school anymore. So I did,
Mm.
6 years of college. So like while I was at Xavier, I was working on my master's degree, and it was coaching education, athlete development master's degree. So I was very geared in with what I was doing at Xavier. I was, coaching club soccer as well. But now it's like this is full time for me, and I don't have to do school anymore. Even though sometimes I miss it, which sounds crazy. I do miss the kind of school aspect, and um, but it's so different now. I feel a little bit more at ease and not as stressed out because I feel like there's multiple things occupying my mind at times. Now this is what I do full time, and I'm so happy with that and a lot more comfortable with it. And obviously having a great relationship, and like with Nate, I kind of like reached out to him. I didn't really know Nate. I'd heard of Xavier, and like I wanted to go to Xavier to get my master's.
Mm.
I knew that. Now it's different, like knowing someone and knowing the system and being comfortable with the system, and now having that experience at Xavier, I mean, helped me tremendously. And um, just growing as a professional, just kind of being allowed to be a sponge and just taking all sorts of different information and just kind of be in my element, but just learning from great people and great coaches. And now I feel like now I'm in the position where I can kind of implement all of that education I got in a very it was very quick 2 years, it felt like. So no, I mean, it's completely different. And then obviously just in a system I'm familiar with, and people I'm familiar with, and no, I mean it makes it so much easier in that sense. So
And that's the key thing, is being familiar with the people that you got around you, because I think that you can grow a lot more by being familiar with those who are around, and it gives you that opportunity to have more autonomy. It gives you opportunity to think of new ideas, because I think when you're at an ease at times and you don't want to get something wrong, so therefore you're not being innovative, and therefore you're not taking forward new ideas, and therefore you're not growing yourself. Whereas when
mhm.
you're familiar with other people, they're quite happy for you to have that autonomy, for you to bring new ideas in, and you can go and approach them and balance that off with
Yep.
them. So it's really helped with that transition. Obviously, transitioning from a student as well as being in a role to being full time and out of it. That's sort of the space that I'm in now, because I'm a student as well as a full time
Yeah.
professional. Whereas in a couple of months, I'm actually get to just be experiencing a full time professional role with and not be studying alongside it, and just have that time to breathe around it, and perhaps have more availability to think upon
Yeah.
what I want to do within working around my role. So that is a big transition in terms of where you were at in terms of what you're doing now as well.
Mhm.
And sometimes, as you said there, you're in a role of analysis, and you're very much focusing upon the operational side, which is a great experience, because you get to bring all those into the role that you're
Mhm.
currently doing. And you get to look at what you're doing on the grass, and develop that coaching side, because when we look at it, we can say, right, we've done analysis, done operations, I've done match day planning, and the logistics, and I've been involved in all those. I've done the coaching side of it. I headed up training. So we've got all these different hats and different experiences, which is great,
Mhm.
but we're not specializing in one, for example. So it's great that you sort of pull back from, being a student and perhaps analysis, and going, actually, my heart of it is coaching and not the analysis.
Yeah.
So I get to
Yeah.
spend more time on that, for example.
Yeah, no, I mean, I grew to love that aspect, and I think now it's funny, because when I was at Xavier, they would ask me if, like, I would be fine doing, certain, just different types of things I did not have any experience in, and honestly, I hated to say no because I knew it was something that could be very valuable to me if,
Mm,
like with coaching, and now in my role now as, a full-time assistant coach, with our staff, we don't have a like in like Division 2, it's very rare as well, but we don't have like an operational person um who books the hotels, and or make sure, like, gets food organized and things like that. So that kind of falls on me. Like, I'm booking the hotels, I'm making sure the buses are arriving, I'm making sure what the girls are getting fed on the road and things like that. So on that end, that helped a lot because I got to learn while I was at Xavier what that entails, especially for just a very high functioning, like very competitive Division 1 program. um so now, I mean, I think things I did at Xavier, I find myself doing now with, just kind of taking it because I'm so used to it. It's not it's not a task to me.
mm,
It's just something I'm just kind of in my head. Like, I've done this before. I can do this. This is super easy. So yeah, no, I mean, it's funny. Just yeah, we're wearing multiple hats. Just being well rounded as a coach, I think is, I mean, helped me put me at ease in different things, and tasks that I had to learn
mm,
now are just super easy to deal with. No, so I mean, it was great. I mean, I don't look back and regret that I didn't get to actually do like the coaching aspect when I was at Xavier. I mean, I got to learn from great ones, and I think that helps me so much now. And like the coaching staff at Xavier, or people that I know I can reach out to if I have questions or I come across something that I'm struggling with. I'm still young. I'm still learning. So I mean, this is a great group of people, and now even now my full time role, I'm surrounded by just fantastic people and to learn from, and I know I can go to them for anything if I am struggling and to understand something, or like not entirely sure and of how to approach something. So I think that's so vital that I got that experience for sure. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to do at that time, but I mean, I grew to love it, and
mm.
and that experience was great. So
And I think that's the important part, is growing to learn that experience as well as taking it forward, but also understanding what you want to do in the future as well. Because you might have had such a great experience of analysis, and you get to take that forward, and your focus might be on the grass. So you might have gone into your job now, and the analysis might be lacking a little bit, or might not be at the standard that you expect, or have experienced by doing that job previously. So by being so engrossed in it, you get to sort of come out of it and go, oh, there's so many systematic failures here, because you've been able to be engrossed by it. You get to see it from being out
Mm,
from outside it. So you might go into your new role, you might go, do you know what, the analysis is lacking, I really want to bring this in, and this is how we're really going to develop the coaching program, and we're going to be more informed about how we look at our systems and how we work with the players, how we give them feedback, for example. So it's a real
yep.
beneficial experience which you can certainly apply. If you went off in terms of marketing, and you might say, oh, I had a bit of interest in marketing, it was a good experience, and I understand optics, understand the different type of preferences, how we engage with stakeholders, but that might take you majorly away from being on the grass, right? Whereas analysis is
Yeah.
still very, very close to it. And that's the things that I've been reflecting on, as the more that I get older, and the more that I look to optimize my time. And a different podcast that I've been listening to, right, is that uh, yes is a form of debt, no is a form of credit, right? And that's
Mhm.
something which really resonated with me, because as you said there, you said yes to it because it was a great experience to you at the time, and now you're in a capacity where you're no longer a student, you're not in the analysis side, but you grew to love it. Now you're doing more of what you love. Now you've realized you're doing more of what you love, and you're a full-time professional. You get the opportunity to look at, well, these opportunities have come my way, actually, is saying yes beneficial to me, or is it beneficial to everyone else, for example? Because once you say yes and you have that form of debt, then you're committing more of your time, which you could never get
Mhm.
back, right? And sometimes it may not always be a beneficial outcome, because you've ended up committing all this time, but there's been no growth forward. There might not be a job at the end of it. Okay, yes, you have different skills, experiences, contacts, and all these other things. However, what you might have missed out on is the specialization in your job on the grass. You might
Yep.
have impacted your relationship with your head coach. You might have had less time to commit to the girls, and therefore, and this resonates with me from a previous guest on the pod, right? And it was definitely an American coach which said it to me: "A master of all is a master of none." And that sits with
Mhm.
me sort of in the back of my mind every day, because sometimes I think, right, I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I'm a podcaster, I'm a coaching advisor, right? So
Yeah.
there's several different roles, and I understand I get all these different experiences, and it's great because I can interlink a lot of what I do right across the board. But then if I'm then looking at what I want to do in coaching, actually, when I get down to the coaching, I extract everything else, and I go, right, do I want to be a head coach or an assistant coach? Do I want to be one who looks at entirely at coaching? Do I want to look at work with youth players, or do I want to look at adults, or do I do both? Therefore, then I'm going, right,
Yeah.
I'm not actually specializing in being a great youth coach. And therefore, I've got all these different skills, but then actually I've limited myself in that process, because I've got so much, but I haven't become a specialist. And therefore, becoming a specialist, you might be identified as someone who's more niche to go and employ, rather than someone who's more
Mhm.
generalized. So sometimes it can be really difficult, because I might look at Kit and go, right, she's really niche, she's specialized, right, I'm going to pay her all the extra money. Or I might look at Coach Johnny, for example, who's real generalizing, do everything across the board. So I can give him
Mhm.
operations, I might ask him to do the marketing, I might do coaching, and he's really flexible. So therefore, is he a good investment because of that? And sometimes we can
Yeah,
overanalyze these things, but we can also specialize and say no to things as we become more experienced and get older.
for sure. And like I like that. I like that takeaway. And I think the biggest thing for me, and that I've always said, is I don't want to ever get too comfortable coaching.
Mm,
Right? You don't ever want to get too comfortable in a role you're in a position you're in. Um, And, I don't want to I think the day I say I know everything there is to know about coaching and I can prove it is probably the day I need to stop coaching. So, I don't wanna ever be the master of it. I don't wanna ever think that I'm at the top of my game coaching wise. I think there's takeaways every season, every year, just especially, like, from your personal standpoint, but then, like, from other people that you can always be taking away from them. So I don't think that's a phrase I ever want to hear myself say, and I think that's the exciting thing is that you're always just kind of always scratching the surface in a sense.
mm,
There's always little things that you can pick up from every experience that you get, because every year brings about its challenges. It brings about the positives as well. So yeah, I do like that though. Yeah, because I think that's something I've never really wanted to be. Is just one dimensional. I would like
mm.
to be more well rounded, wear multiple hats. Kind of be able to contribute to a program in a sense of like, this is XYZ, like I can do this and kind of just take things off the plate of others.
Mm.
And also get the coaching aspect as well. And so yeah, no, I love that. So
And I think that's important because, for example, if I was a head coach and I came in, and you were one of the assistant coaches, and I say I might have three assistant coaches, and I might have all this trust in you because we've developed a really close relationship. I know you can take on the operational demands, and I know I could delegate to you because I know the task would get done right. So I'm looking to you
mhm.
because of familiarity. I'm looking at you because of relationship. I'm looking at you because of that level of trust. So therefore, I delegate these responsibilities, but it moves you away from being coaching to being more operational, and therefore you're on the grass less. Now, for you, you get to go away from being a specialist or something that you enjoy or being on the grass, and you're actually becoming very limited and very
Mhm.
functional and task processed and orientated rather than being the full-time coach which you have. So therefore, as a head coach, I've actually looked at that wrong, or anyone in management or leadership, for example, and I've taken away your greatest skill set because I wanted to delegate to you because of the level of trust I have. And I think that can be a very frustrating thing when we have those different experiences in our lives, but certainly being drawn away from what interests us the most in terms of what could end up coming our way, for example.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been very fortunate. Haven't felt that way. But I mean, I know certainly. I mean, just to be pulled, yeah, like you said, pulled away from some, a certain task and or something that you specialize in. I mean, it can be a very daunting thing, and I think at times some can feel maybe taken advantage of by because like they always say yes to
Mm.
things. And I like we said earlier about there are times you can say no as well. So, that's something I've learned as well, and I think just in roles that I'm comfortable in, now that I've learned them, I do feel a little bit more comfortable kind of delegating things, and with our staff. So we have a head coach, and then we have me, and then we have a grad assistant. So that's someone that's in school, getting their school covered. And so essentially, like the things like booking hotels and like the travel, like all the travel itinerary stuff, I feel comfortable doing because that's something I'm used to doing, and I have the experience in doing. But there might be other things that kind of get delegated amongst our group, and I think it's kind of a well-oiled machine in a sense in that regard. And so I feel very fortunate in the position I'm in with the staff I'm surrounded by, that I've never really felt that was being pulled away from something that I feel I'm better suited doing. And at the end of the day, I think everyone has a role to play, and we play it. We keep up with it well, and um, no, I mean, I think, like I said, just kind of well-oiled machine for sure for us.
And I think that's what it comes down to is what you're happy to take on and what you trust yourself to do. And some things that you might be very easy to delegate, but if you can do it in your time frame and it's not going to be too exhaustive, and it's going to be all done, dusted, and it makes you feel a lot more comfortable, then yes, certainly
Mhm,
have that responsibility. Because there's someone that I line manage, and he doesn't have some of the operational side of the things which I'd
mhm,
like him to have. And sometimes I'm like, I need to delegate to him because he needs to really develop that skill set. But when I'm out on a Thursday afternoon because I'm at uni and I come back into it in Friday morning, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got all this operational thing which I need to catch up with, because where it's ended up naturally being delegated, it's not
yep,
up to the standard that I expected. So therefore, I feel a level of control over it, and therefore I feel a lack of trust. So then I have to develop my mindset where I look at that trust and look at how I evolve my staff around me. But when it comes into it, and one of the considerations and perspectives that I put on it is, you've gone into this great assistant coach role, you've got a fantastic head coach, as you said, and you've got that relationship, which is great. So you've elaborated on that a bit more. But before I came on, I was thinking about that assistant coach to head coach relationship, right?
mhm,
So you've been in the role coming up 2 years now. You're settled, you've got a good team, and you might want to be there for 5 years, 6 years, whatever, right?
mhm,
But taking away all of that and just thinking this prior, now you're in this role, you're motivated, you want to be a head coach sometime in the future. You're planning for that in the back of your mind, but you're also enjoying the process. You have a great head coach you're learning from, and
mhm,
you're quite settled in life as well around all these things. So you're very motivated, and you know that you want an ultimate goal to become a head coach. You want to progress. How do you then go and have that conversation with your head coach to say, look, I'm looking to get into the role that you're currently in, but I'm also very
Mhm,
committed to what I'm doing here now. And I'm
mhm.
also thankful for the opportunity you've given me, because it's quite a double-edged sword at times, because it's going, thank you very much. I'd love to be here, but also I'm very aspirational towards the future, right? How do you look at that
Yeah.
kind of conversation?
Yeah, I think that just goes back to being very fortunate that I do know who I'm working with and have a good relationship, and I have tons of respect for Tasha, our head coach, and what she's been able to do in her role, and that was always like her long term goal is to get a head coaching job and everything. And I think for me, like right now, well, yes, I mean in the future, of course, at the end of the day, I would love to to be a head coach. Like that's something like in the future. I'm not saying like in another year or so, because honestly, I love the role of the assistant coach. I like the aspect of just kind of being able to balance out things for our head coach, and um, like I don't know if I want that head coaching role because I know what it entails and everything, and that's not something I'm really looking for right now. I'm still young and still feel like there's experience to be had to kind of probably better suit me when I get a head coaching job and kind of have a little bit more um, you know, room to breathe in that sense, and be a little bit more comfortable in that role because I know what comes with it. So because I've seen what our head coach has like her life and everything, and just other head coaches I know. I mean, it just changes significantly once you get that title. As funny as it sounds. So as an assistant coach, like I do enjoy the role, and with Tasha, I mean, we've had conversations of like she understands that I'm not going to be here forever. And that's just the reality. And and every year, there's opportunities that come around, and um, just kind of trying to balance out which ones are maybe not the right fit and everything. And honestly, with where I'm at, and I've never really felt like I needed to leave. Every like, look, it's been 2 years. Next year will be my third year once we get to the fall, and um, I think every season I've learned, kind of, I had my struggles, but then also really prevailed in different senses. And I mean, as long as I'm doing that, I feel very good with where I'm at my current, with my current program. But so I've always felt comfortable going to Tasha with things like that, and kind of understanding, like, and like, she's even made the comment, like, I know you're not going to be here for forever. And, so, every year is just kind of like at the end of the season, it's a reevaluation of where I stand, and, um, with the program, and, so far so good. So, haven't really kind of come across like, okay, it's time for a little bit of a change. And, you know, myself, and especially with the master's degree, with my master's program, we were taught to be very reflective coaches. So, constantly like just thinking about like how the session plan went or how a game went. And honestly, that's something I never really had with me until I went through my master's course. And I'm really glad we did talk a lot about it and spend a lot of time actually having to reflect on certain things. And because it's allowed me to kind of take the time to just kind of look back and be like, oh well, that actually went better than expected, or maybe that one wasn't one we do again. So no, I mean, it's great being able to have that kind of open door policy that, I'm very comfortable with our head coach and have a great relationship with her. And um, just understanding that I don't feel like I'm locked to the program. And, as long as I'm, enjoying and still learning, and, it's bringing about the opportunities I want it to, then um, I'm in it. So, yeah, no, I mean, it is really nice. It's honestly helped me a lot, especially just coming out of college, because it was just such a grind in college to juggle multiple things. And now it's kind of felt like, while it's still chaotic at times, like I said, like the spring right now is a little bit slower with the period that we're in, but then it'll start to pick up towards in another month or so. And then obviously the fall is just a whole nother beast. But no, it helps me in a lot of good ways, because can kind of separate from like being in the office. And then, I do consider her a friend as well.
Mm.
We do consider each other friends. So just kind of being able to separate that and kind of compartmentalize, like, that respect, goes both ways. So
I think that makes things easier because I look at the relationship I have with my line manager, and I say we're very good friends at the underlying value of it, right? We get
mhm,
along very well outside of work. We catch up outside of work. We have good conversations. I mean, that allows us to progress internally very, very well. And we also have that respect levels in terms of I understand he's my line manager, understand that I need to go to him as a manager, and sometimes we're not friends when we're in work because we need to look
mhm,
at a situation from a management perspective and a systematic perspective. So
yeah.
we have that good respect level. But I think it's for me, I've always looked at everyone that I work with closely to be a friend. And now you speak to other leaders and managers, they would say absolutely no chance. But I'm like, actually, that's the great relationship you have with people. That's the great charisma. That's the great skill set you have. And I think that really evolves you as a leader when you become friends, and if not friends, almost as close as with the people that you manage and have around you, because that's going to make a difference to your culture and environment, and certainly the relationships which you have when you collectively approach certain situations, for example.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing has always been that if there's something I don't understand to a certain aspect, or I'm just struggling to kind of like make sense of it, I've never felt like, oh, probably it is not best to ask her that. But there's been times where like we're not always gonna like see eye to eye on things, and that's fine. And that I've never felt like that's an issue. But at the end of the day, like our common goal is like we see the same, we say see eye to eye on the overall vision for, like outlook and what we expect of like the team. Like that never has faltered. But there's been times where, there are difficult conversations that you have to have. And at the end of it, like you understand like it's like it's like no hard feelings at the end of the day. You don't take it personally, like it's part of like the position you're in. You have to have those difficult conversations, just like you have to have difficult conversations with your players. I've been very fortunate, like, I've never walked away from a situation just kind of taken something very personally that's occurred. It's never been to that extent, and that's something I'm very fortunate for. But I know that's not always going to be the case, and that's why it's been nice to kind of have like a guess a better, well-rounded experience for sure. So
And I think that's the important thing upon your reflective practice, as well as understanding how to reflect upon certain things and how perspectives and communication styles come into it. Because the way something that might be said to us, we might be over elaborating on it in our own minds, and therefore we become very anxious about a situation or apprehensive, or we're starting to develop a fear or worry, for example, because of the way something is said when it was never intended
yeah.
that way. And therefore, it's actually affecting us when the other person might be at home doing whatever they're doing, and they
Hmm.
never intended it to be that way. So therefore, you're stimming on it. You then go and meet them next day, or you have a conversation with them, and they're like, "That was never my intention in the first place." So sometimes you can overanalyze that situation. And
Hmm.
as you said earlier on, is that you've done that reflective practice in your masters. So when you have that reflective opportunity to go back and try and overcome fears, and there might be a level of anxiety which actually doesn't exist, but your mind has already
Hmm.
put up that fear, and you've
Yeah.
developed that. Then what reflective practice do you use to overcome those situations, for example?
Um, I think the biggest thing for me is just kind of basically stripping everything down and kind of seeing, all right, what occurred? Kind of, was it preventable? Like, could this have been prevented? And um, like, I think overall, how the overall feeling that surrounds the situation, and emotions can be raw. And I think I've always been very good about, I'm not like a person that just kind of spouts things. I'm very I take some time to kind of process things. And so I've always been very good. I just kind of let things sit for a bit, and then I like to just then talk about them and address it. So I've never been one just to kind of just have like outbursts and things like that. And um, it's kind of helped me in being reflective. So just being allowed to just have the time to kind of sit in it for a little bit and kind of figure out like when it came to like a game, and directly after a game sometimes you feel like a bad game, we'll say, you kind of look at it and you're like, I don't think we could have played any, like, it's like, this is terrible. But then you actually like because me and Tasha, talked about it at times. Like, there's been times where we've like in the moment of a game, like we're like, wow, we are just not with it. And then you go back and watch, and you're like, oh, well, we actually did some fairly good things. And you're the first one to put your hand up and be like, all right, that might have been a little bit harsh of thing to say in the moment. So it's I think I don't even know how to put that into, I guess, like how I would word that. But I think this like the biggest way I think I go about just being reflective is just being allowed to just kind of strip everything down, kind of look at key things that happen, and just kind of just like pros cons to each takeaway, and basically just look at it from that aspect, if that makes sense.
No, no, it makes total sense. And I think that all comes down to systems, right? Because one of the biggest things which I was listening to on a different podcast, right, is rather than setting goals for the year, going, right, for example, I want to do this year, I want to do that. I want to lose 10 kilograms in the gym, for example, or
Mhm,
I want to lose X amount of weight in the gym. It's actually becoming process driven. So instead of going, right, I want to lose this in the gym, I'm going to go to the gym more often. So it's actually looking at that situation and going, right, I
mhm,
have to, I have to fix this situation by doing X, Y, and Z. But actually, what I need to do is just approach the situation with an open
mhm.
mind, understand perhaps how that could have gone down the day before, and it's not the way that I'm thinking about it. And then I
Yeah,
just relax tonight. I go and have that conversation tomorrow, and then I'll find out more rather than stimming over it over the course of the night, for example. So I think the more you can draw yourself back, relax yourself, and then have an outlook towards, well, life happens, and the ultimatum of it is that we die at one point at any time, right?
mhm, mhm,
So everything leading up to that doesn't really matter in a sense of that ultimatum. So in the process driven, we need to be very relaxed and be very fortunate to what we have in front of us. So the less stress, the less fears that we have, then we just approach things because things come and go, they move on in our lives. And as I say to a kid, is when I'm teaching them, just ask this question or approach this situation, because 10 years from now, you're never going to remember this exact day or this exact
yeah,
moment. You might remember the experience, but you don't remember the actions on this exact day. And it's all about those different ways that we approach it in terms of enjoying that and having those different outlooks. But for me, it's always relax first, bring yourself back down. And you know what? If the worst happens, the worst happens. We just deal with it. Life moves on. And it isn't going to be great, but we just endure it and we come out the other side of it. And that'll be something in the future that will happen. But we're just going to have to see what comes in front of us first. Um, and there's a lot of different reflective practice which comes into it, but that is sort of looking at different ways that we can approach those mindsets and what comes into it. Now, looking at yourself primarily as a coach now here and what you do on the grass, and you've talked about some of the different tactics and systems which you have in your team. Now, you've mentioned systems quite a few times actually. So one question I actually have for you, and this is a big reflective piece over my mind and what I'm doing right now in terms of my studies, in terms of my work, in terms of coaching, is there a difference between strategy, system, framework, and tactics?
is there a difference between all of those, like, in an individual aspect?
Yeah,
So strategy, framework, tactics, and what was the
system.
fourth?
So
The
system,
system itself?
strategy, tactics, and framework.
I think there can be. I think there can be. Overall framework can, I think, like how you get to it can look different, like in the set of a system that you want to play. Tactically, I think they can all kind of mix and match for sure. I don't know even how I would answer that. Actually, you got me stumped there. That's actually a very good question. Um, I don't know how I would answer that one, but I like that though. I would have to think on that.
Because it's certainly the more and more I think about it, the more and more they are their own separate entities. But I hear other coaches going, right, I've got a framework with my team and not a strategy, or I have a framework and not a tactics, right? But then
Mhm,
I listen to someone like Mourinho, and he's like, right, actually, what you have is you can have a system, but your systems of play will be very different to the tactics that you deploy, which is very different to the framework which you have within your team. So if I said to you, right, Kate, we're going to sit down, our whole strategy is going to focus upon the system, is going to focus entirely on a strategy for the year. So we're going to break down all of our travel systems. systems. We're going to break down all of our logistics. We're going to break down the recruitment, marketing. We're going to look at all that as one strategy, right? Our framework is what we're going to do on the pitch and how we're coaching, how we look at our coach environment, and that's going to be its own separate framework as well. But me or you could step back. We bring in any coach. They have a framework in terms of how they can deliver a session. They have that level of slippage within it, and therefore they're able to deliver in terms of what we expect in terms of our objectives and principles in the program. Now, the system is what has been instilled in the team and how we play and what we do week to week. And then we look at different tactics deployed and what the opposition are doing. So actually, it's this big strategic piece of work, how you match all of that together. And therefore, you could mix or match coaches. You could take coaches out. You could look at different ways of how your coaching looks primarily on a pitch. So I might be the strategist who looks at all of our planning for the year, but you might look at primarily the full-on detail of the framework of coaching and looking at, right, so as you said, looking at the details of the weight of pass, for example, that would fit in the framework of looking at our work with the players on the grass. So actually, where you become that specialist, we actually intertwined our skill sets to look at the best complementary ways to grow the team, but actually we're not stuck in doing just a system, right? We're a high pressing team and that's the only way we know. Well, actually, our strategy for this year has been looking at player development over a 3-month period, and part of that has been developing their game IQ from the work that we've done on and off the pitch. So therefore, if our system isn't working, then how can we adapt that through the framework that we're deploying to really look at how we develop our system of play depending on what the opposition is in 3 months time, whether that's going to be a difference between us winning the championship or conference, or whether it's looking for a playoff position or finishing comfortably in a table, for example,
Yeah, no, I like that. No, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I didn't even realize Marino had said that. I mean, I'm not entirely shocked, but but no, I mean, I like that. I'll have to actually kind of spend some more time looking into that for sure.
Mm. I think it's definitely interesting because the more and more you think of it, and even then I'm reflecting upon reflecting, right? Because I'm over analyzing this sometimes and I'm thinking
Mhm.
too much into it. But I think there's certainly a difference between system and tactics, right? So
Yes.
so as you said there, right, you're a high pressing team, right, who like possession. Now I might go, right, I'm going to plan to play Kate's team with my team, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy a high press on my team. So we're going to do high press v high press. So in this situation, now you start to work out 10 minutes in, we're pressing you all the time. What would you do in a tactical framework or your tactical response during a game to the opposition in that live moment? So what would you do? Would you change your system to sit back off and counter press? How would you approach the situation?
I mean, for us, we'd probably just deploy a different formation. We've kind of been faced with situations where our press might not be working against a certain formation, and so we try to flip the switch a little bit and kind of go about it in a little bit of a different way with a different kind of overall makeup to our team. Probably, make a few swaps because so in the collegiate game you're allowed to there's no re-entry in the first half, but so say in the first half, like the first few minutes, things are just kind of, like they came out a different way or came out in a different formation than we fully intended for them to come out in, which has happened. And even throughout the process of scouting the team, and we've kind of had to make a few changes to what we normally play. So for like reentry in the college game, if you leave and you get subbed off in the first half, you have no reentry. But in the second half, if you get subbed off, you have reentry. So you start the second half, you get subbed off, you can re-enter the game. But then if you get pulled again, you can't re-enter. So like, there's been situations where I mean, and I've seen teams pull players like in the first 20 minutes or so, just to kind of that probably have like the mindset of like to better execute a certain formation. And I mean, we've kind of a few times. I think last year, a few times we kind of had to tweak our formation a little bit just to kind of better implement our style of play, because our original formation was not doing the trick, and we kind of saw different spaces of play to kind of that we could be attacking more with a different formation. So not necessarily, like I said, not necessarily have to go away from our identity or anything, but just kind of having to make a few like personnel changes and just changing the makeup a little bit to it.
And so you've changed your system of play and you've adapted and you've looked at identifying personnel which is going to suit it. And I think the primary cause in terms of how we respond to different situations. It's looking what we have available on the bench and look at how we start. So when you're looking at your recruitment processes, then do you try to look at it where you have a very balanced team, or do you look at the players for who they are and what they're able to bring, and then developing them as players over the course of your program?
I think the big element to our recruiting process. So yeah, when you are looking at, so there's two different ways we can recruit. We can obviously, the transfer portal is a thing here. So there are JUCO kids that go to a 2-year college and then they opt to go like to a 4-year university, and then you have like your like Division 1, Division 2, Division 3 transfers that you can get NAIA. But then you also recruit a handful of high school kids. And I think we have a really good system where we don't bring in too many transfers, especially, we might bring in like 2 or 3, I think usually max each year. But you do try to get, the high school kids because, I mean, ultimately they are supposed to be around for 4 years and then you have a lot more time to develop them. So for us, I think our biggest thing is kind of looking at kids who, I mean, we feel that can fit into our system of play. We kind of pay attention to how their particular club team plays and if they can play that sort of style. But I think the biggest thing is like, yes, play is super important. But then when we get into the recruiting process and we are talking to kids, I think our biggest conversation that we have is like, while we have to be the right fit for them, or like, well, like they have to be the right fit for us, but we have to be the right fit for them. So the biggest thing I like start talking to them about whenever I have a conversation with a recruit is like, what do you want to get like out of your experience? Like, what are you comfortable doing? Like in a sort of system, like where are you comfortable like in being, because I mean the reality is you might be recruited to come in and play a 9. You might be converted somewhere else, which is very rare. But I mean, I've seen fullbacks transition into wingers, which isn't like a huge transition and things like that. But I think just kind of going after kids that we feel like personality wise and obviously like academic, like the current school I'm at is has a very high academic standard. Our program has a very high academic standard. We have the highest team. We're usually one of the highest teams on campus with the highest like team average GPA. So as funny as it sounds, like you're kind of looking at kids GPA, like will they struggle here, will they not? Because I mean that's the last thing you want is just to be pulled from the athletic side because you can't handle the academic side. So that's like the worst experience you can have as a student athlete. So I think when recruiting kids, like you look at, okay, do their wingers is there room for growth? Like, do we feel like they could potentially grow at our program, help us in terms of what we're losing, like in terms of graduating players and things like that? Do we think this kid can come in and make an impact, or are we just kind of long term looking at this kid to kind of gradually get better and better? Like goalkeepers, like there's certain things we look at for goalkeepers, defenders, like do we need a defender that's going to come in and just absolutely just be a starter? And, so we look at little things like that. And just in terms of like, can they fit our system of play and like have the conversations? Do we like feel like this kid can go through like multiple, formation changes? Like, will they be up for that task? Because I mean, there are times where we might have only trained a couple times in a certain formation, and then all of a sudden we're playing in it because we had to make the change. And like fortunately, our girls have responded very well anytime we've had to do that. But the reality is like you have to surround yourself with the right group of players and personalities as well. So especially when you get into a mix of about 30 girls, everyone's going to be differing a little bit in personality, but if you have the overall cohesion of a group, then that makes our lives a lot easier.
And I think that's the important thing is having that cohesion throughout the group, especially when there's so many different personality types that you have, especially trying to have that recruitment element in terms of play development, in terms of culture, environment, intensity, standards, systems of play. There's lots of
Mhm.
different cards which are being dealt here, but it's also trying to keep them all aligned in the same place in terms of coaching, management, how you support each individual. So you're not stripping back their personality as well at the same time. So you have a program, you want them all to grow in terms of who they are. You don't want to strip back, and that's that's part of some of my reflective pieces. Actually, when we're getting players into practice, are we getting them all to do the same thing and we're developing repetition? And therefore, are they becoming very robotic? Or are we actually
Yeah.
giving them a chance to be creative, and therefore do they have their personality types? And that sort of fits into my point earlier on when I talked about Sleeping Lions compared to some of the players which you have which are forthcoming, because I think some of the great individual students which I have, and because they're not academic as such, it doesn't mean that they didn't have a great personality type to be a great entrepreneur or be a great business owner, because they have very good communication skills. They're very good at talking to other people. They're very good at analyzing a situation.
Mhm.
Now, their written side may not be as good, but they can employ people to do that, or they learn to do that over a period of time. Just right now, school isn't the thing for them, but they possess all the skills: reading, writing, how to respond to letters, writing emails. So just because they don't have the qualification which says they do so, it means that they have, but their mind is so occupied elsewhere because they're in the
Yeah.
future that school just isn't working for them. So for me, it's not about going, right, we have a system and we're reducing all the coaches do the exact same thing through standardization, and therefore we're limiting players. Actually, I want my players to grow. I want Kate to come in and be exactly who she is on the pitch. Now, I might have an
Mhm.
expectation in the way that we want to play, but she's got freedom to go and do that as long as there's intensity there, as long as we're playing, 4-3-3, for example, and we might be a possession-based team which is looking at high press. She can do whatever she wants in coaching as long as she's
Mhm.
organized, as long as the players are enjoying it, as long as she wants to be there as well. However she plans that session, it's the great thing, because I remember during lockdown, I was working for a header phase. So you have a younger phase, older phase at the academies that we're in, right? And the
Mhm.
younger phase was like, right, you can go in, you can play sessions, do whatever you want. We just have to make these objectives. Whereas the head of the older phase, which had his own set of coaches, he had pre-planned every session that he wanted each of his age groups to do.
Okay.
So coaches were given this session plan. They had to go and deliver that session to the way he expected it to be delivered. I was like, sure, I'm so glad I don't work for that head of phase, because yes, okay, you might have a session plan, right? But sometimes I've been with coaches to give me a session plan. I'm like, what does this even mean, right? And it can be the
Yeah.
clearest thing as well on paper, but it's their session, it's what they've designed as well. So they
Mhm.
might walk me through it. Then I'll go, right, now I understand what you're saying. Now I see what you want to get out of it. But I think it's having that freedom to go on and do things and not stripping back the personality from the players or the individuals or the coaches we have around us.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to what you said kind of about being your own person, like, come in, be yourself. And I think the conversation, we've had some really great players who, have graduated and moved on, and, they were, all conference, all tournament type players. And I think the way our program, like what we build our program on, the foundation it's built on is like, all right, next person up. Like, you don't have to come in and be this player. You don't have to be like her type of player. Just be yourself. Like, there's a reason why you're here at the end of the day. There's a reason why you're recruited to play. And there's a reason why you're being given the opportunity to play. So, like we always say, we're not built like we don't want to miss a player. Like, we don't want to ever like miss a player in the terms of like what they kind of brought like on the field. Like, yes, you miss like their person, you miss them as a person and everything, but you never want to miss a person to the extent like where you're like, oh, we could really use her right now. So I think that's important. And in terms of our players' mindset, like, you don't have to be her. You have to be like yourself. There's a reason why you were, given this opportunity. And I think as soon as they start to grasp that, and obviously, confidence and in the confidence and having the mindset like, okay, yeah, I can do this. Like, that's why I'm here. It makes a world difference. But yeah, never wanting to miss a particular player. Like, like, oh, there's shoes to fill. There's never shoes to fill. There's like, fill your own shoes. So.
Mm. I get that, and there's a young person which I can think of, and she is very charismatic for the age of 13, 14, which she is. She is perhaps a little bit too charismatic for some people, and perhaps isn't taken in the right way, right? But she's easily one of my favorite students. I see so much potential in her, and she's one that I allude to when her mind is so fixed elsewhere, because there's certain areas in the curriculum which just isn't suited to her, and she's got no interest because she's too highly intelligent and strung to be like, why do I want that? It's not good enough for me.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's the wrong mindset to have. But she already knows at the age of 13 that it isn't going to benefit her in terms of her future. And uh, I quite understand that, and I'm quite fortunate to look at it and go, do you know what? I emphasize and understand that, and I see what you do, right? So we've given her an opportunity to develop a podcasting score. Now, one of the most brazen things is that yesterday I had a ring member of parliament to appear on a podcast, right? And some people might say that's quite cheeky, it's very forthcoming. You've got to be, big and brazen to do something like that. I'm like, yeah, let's get her to do it, right? And she just rang her straight up, yeah, da 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 da. She got a bit nervous as she'd done it because she was like, all right, I'm making a phone call now. I was like, good, we're starting to develop other skills and we're starting to find some of your other fears, right? But the great thing is that we're just taking things as it can, because it's that thing, if you don't ask, you don't get. So the more I can get you to do that, and the more you just take that throughout life and don't even have a second thought about it, it's actually going to get you to move further. So I think that's the important thing about each of our personalities and some of the players, individuals that we have around us. But I know we got around 20 minutes left, and I'm making sure that I'm sticking to your time schedule, right?
No, you're good.
I got this in something that I want to talk about, and then we'll look at our quick fire questions at the end, which I'm excited to do with you again.
Okay.
But one of the things is that I wanted to look at was practice design and player development, right? So how do you keep habits and routines within practice design when you change your practice design each session or over the course of your week, so players don't become complacent? So what I mean by that is you might have 6 weeks, you've developed, a session where you do your warm up, you do your main activity, you do your small sided game at the end. You do that for 6 weeks. The consistency is very much the same, right? You do the same session plan. So your practice design is very straightforward. You've got good habits because players know that you're going to do each of these things. They transition. You know how you're going to work with these players. Now, for the next 6 weeks, you might go, right, I'm going to do 2 weeks of that original session design. Then I'm going to do the next 4 weeks a whole part whole. So it's where you start with a game, you go into your main practice, and then you go back to a game, for example. So the next 4 weeks, you've decided to do that so players don't become so complacent. So you keep them fresh, keep them vibrant, right? But as you've changed your practice design and you've thrown some players off, which is good because they're ready for it. Some players are thrown off entirely and they're still trying to get their heads around it. But you might have lost a bit of routine in terms of, those quick transitions between what you want to do, between going from game to session, back to game. They're a little bit slow, a little bit sluggish. So the routine of that effective transition has been lost effectively. So when you're looking at your practice design, do you consider your habits and routines, or is it just a case of you have a practice design which fits you across the course of your season, and then it might be the odd, say 5% of sessions where you've changed them over the course of the season?
So it's funny because there's like a phrase that our head coach, when we kind of look at session plans and things like that. So our session plans week to week, it's so funny. Like a match day -1 can write itself. Like match day -1 never changes from what it's going to look like. It's going to be, like same thing every time. So our girls can basically run the session themselves. Like we could leave and they would get through it. But week to week, it kind of like we will tweak things geared towards a certain opponent as we build into things, and as we get closer to the game, like we'll do some more solely focused on who we're playing. But it's funny, like the phrase that sticks with me that our head coach like picked up from one of her previous coaching gigs is repetition without repeating. So that's kind of how we operate. Like we will every week will kind of very much look similar to the week before and the weeks before that. But what we do is never repeating. It might, have like a lot of very similar elements of play, but it's a repetition, but without repeating it. And so we just kind of strip things out that more utilize of what we're looking at in terms of who we're playing. And I think that's super important. And I mean, so like the session week to week, and especially with where we are in a particular day of the week. So if we're on like a Monday, we don't play until Wednesday. It might be a little bit of a heavier session. So like the reps and the intensity might be at a different place than where it would the next day in terms of, and we don't really call them drills either. We play very much kind of geared towards live play, like, certain elements of the game. Especially as we look towards postseason, we'll kind of give the girls a scenario like you are down 1-0 with 2 minutes left. Other team, you are up 1-0 with 2 minutes left. Manage the game or win the game or draw the game up. And so I think our girls enjoy that. Like, they always make comment like, I wonder what we're doing at training today. So But I mean, I think they enjoy that element of like nothing is ever a huge shock to them. Like it's things they've seen before. Obviously, like the freshmen, they come in, they don't have a like they don't have that yet. They don't have the freedom to say that just yet. But like comes the spring and the following fall, like they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that from last fall.
Mm.
Um, so I think, I mean, that phrase kind of sticks out to me. I mean, from the first time she kind of told me about like when she picked that up from one of her previous coaching gigs is repetition without repeating. And I think that is, I mean, I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy that, week to week, it kind of is a little similar in ways. Like you don't just completely throw out last week what you did last week and kind of start fresh. It's just kind of building off of things and building onto things and building towards who you're playing and what everything's looking like in that regard. And I mean, the girls enjoy it too. And, no, I think that's something that sticks out big to me. So it's not the matter of like week to week, just kind of starting from scratch and kind of building up a whole new week of a session plans, just basically kind of taking what you need to implement for a particular opponent and just kind of building onto it and into the next one.
I like what you say there, and I like the way that you piece that together. And I've just noted down there live play because I think that's definitely a consideration which really fits into something that which a previous guest has said to me, William Shapiro, right? And the way
Mm.
that he looks at each of his sessions is he might have a referee in one game and he doesn't call a tackle because he wants to look at the players and how they respond to it. So therefore, then they have that expectation of there's no expectation of the referee there, so they have to get on with playing. They have to be adaptive. They have to be resilient and all these things. And I like that because live play is looking at what you can do within practice in terms of how you
Mm.
transition into game day, right? So I really like what you say there. But repetition without repeating, I think, also has a space for me because, again, I'm reflecting in terms of what I do with my team now, for example. So I'm going to be with the 13s for the next 5-6 weeks. So I've been looking at a warm up, and our warm ups are very dynamic in the way that we move. There's a lot of dynamic stretching. We get them in. It's only an hour session. So for me, it's get that in, get them warmed up, straight into some main practice design, and then look at the small sided game. So I'm very quick on my warm up. Whereas next week, I want them to look at getting a lot of touches on the ball in their warm up, getting them moving around ball each. And now I might do that for the next 5 or 6 weeks because I want to try and get their ball mastery up because I feel some players are starting to lack that. So I've identified that. And now how can I utilize time where they're getting more touches and they'll do a bit of warm up as they're moving around. And those who start to arrive to the session earlier, then I can start to go, right, actually, today's session is an hour and 15, and we're going to do our dynamics here and try and utilize the space in terms of the other teams that we have around us, right? But repetition without repeating might be a case of, oh, right, I might spend the next 3 weeks and they got this ball mastery. So I might say one touch, two touch. I might say tic tacs. I might say toe taps. I might say
Mm.
left foot only, right foot only. I might say switch. So they leave the ball, they run and get their other ball, right? So they're just constantly moving for 10
Mm.
minutes. And there's lots of different things. I might throw things in, such as Cruyff turn, outside hook. I might say step over, all these different elements, right? And you get to add more in, they get to develop some skills, get to have fun with it at the same time. But then I might say, right, you might say to me, right, I want Luca, we're going to do a repetition this week, but I'm going to do the warm up. But we're not going to repeat what you did last week, but the repetition is going to be there, right? So Kate
Mhm.
comes to me, and I'm thinking, right, oh, what's Kate got planned, right? So you might go, right, I'm going to play tic tac toe, but they're going to do it with the ball. So therefore, they're running up with the ball, they put the bib down, they run back with the ball, next player goes. So they're getting repetition because they're getting
Yeah.
touches in. So therefore, you're actually masking what you have done, and they're going, oh, I didn't realize I was getting ball mastery because you've done that repetition without repeating what I've done every week by just making that slight
Mhm.
adjustment, wherefore it's keeping it fresh.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of the kids probably feel like they're taking in something, like they're getting more information. Like, they week in, week out, they know, all right, well, we're going to continue to build off of this, but it's just going to look a little different. And I think, especially from like our girls, I think our girls enjoy it. They kind of know, like, nothing's going to come as like a huge shock to them. Like, it might be a little shocking at first, like, especially like when we might kind of give the logistics of everything, like, these are the rules, the layout, everything. They might not like them all the time, especially when they start to change a little bit. But I mean, I mean, from a coaching standpoint, I think there's a nice element of, not having to completely scrap everything.
Mm.
You just kind of, there are ways to add in different variations to certain drills and, just, play in like session plans and things like that. So, No, I mean, I enjoy it, and I mean, I can see where, especially like young kids, especially, from when the times I worked with, young kids as well when I was, a few years ago. I think I was very much in the sense of I probably could have done a little bit better without, like, sometimes I did repeat a little bit, but especially I was working with 9 and 10-year-olds. I felt like the more repetition they got and repeating, the more it would kind of be in their head, like, this is what we're gonna do. And it definitely paid off in ways. But then I also saw ways like, okay, we probably could have scrapped that one a
Mm.
little bit. But no, I mean, I think it's nice, a little bit of an element to have.
I think so, but when you said you reflected there about coaching those 10-year-olds and finding different ways to say things and get their communication through, I think by constantly reaffirming your message to different groups that they're going to get it into
Mhm.
their minds anyway. And then as you evolve and develop your different ways of coaching, you might be looking for an answer, but you might ask it in a series of different ways. So I might have an expectation of the answer that I'm looking for, but players haven't got it. So I'll just ask a question in a completely different way, and I'll ask it, in a different series, or I'll ask them. Someone I might look for another player, and I might get their answer, and then this gets that other
Mhm.
player thinking. So I think what you say there is a good balance between both. And if I'm constantly repeating my message, then by the end of it, the player should give me that answer straight away. So I think it's
Yeah.
a good way of looking at both and that communication which comes into it. But if I was to say to you, right, if there's one objective which is going to be consistent throughout, say, 10 different sessions, what would that one consistent objective be which you're trying to instill as a coach in a program of what you're trying to do with your players?
Like one of our sole objectives that come out basically across the board week in, week out.
Yeah,
Um, I think honestly, like the possession element, we always do something that details possession and keeping the ball and moving the ball and just having creativity on the ball, not being a super one-dimensional player in that regard. That's something I mean, yeah, week in, week out, we do something that's every session we do something that's geared towards possession. It's funny, like, like we might spend so much time on finishing, but we will spend some time on the possession side. And no, I think that's a very consistent foundation that we're built on, is very much possession based.
I like it, and I think that is fits in terms of your style and what you want to do. So therefore, if it's consistent, then therefore the system should be very natural to the players over the course of the
Mhm.
sessions, over the program, etc. So Kate, I'm very considerate of the fact that we have 7 minutes left, right?
You're
So
good.
I'm keen to get quick fire questions in. And now, usually when I do quick fire questions with some coaches, it's taking up to half hour, and I don't mind that whatsoever, right? But I'm like, this has gone past what the point of quick fire questions is. So it actually leads us up quite nicely because it's literally quick fire questions. So you
All
might be
good.
one of
Yeah.
the few who has actually done this in a quick fire scenario, right? So
All
I've
right.
changed them from our last time we've had a conversation just around a little bit.
Okay.
What is your favorite food?
Favorite food? Oh, pasta. Like any sort of pasta.
Good choice. Good choice. Favorite TV show?
TV show would be The Office. Like I'm sorry, the US version. I've never seen the UK version, but the US version.
That's okay. I love both, right? And the more and more I speak to American coaches, right, and the more American television I watch, and the more YouTube, the more Americanized I become in my thinking, right? So I think I've started to gear
Okay.
myself towards American life, right? So when people give me those answers, I'm quite happy to accept them for what they are, right? So last
Okay.
night I had some food. I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna sit down and go watch telly. Should I watch a bit of Modern Family, right? Because I've been watching
Oh,
that
okay.
over and over recently. Yeah. I was like,
Okay.
no, I just need a bit of British TV tonight, right? I've been watching too much American telly, right? So, but the
Okay.
US Office is a great choice. So I'll definitely let that one come into the play of it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, between The Office and Dairy Girls, honestly, I really like Dairy Girls, even though it's done. But I will rewatch it. Yeah, season to season.
I get what you mean there. Favorite film?
Favorite film? Ooh, that one might stump me. I've always been Miracle. That's always been one of my go-tos. Have you seen that
Nice.
one?
No, I haven't. No.
You'll have to watch it. It's about like I forget what year it was. Don't ask me. It was like the Olympic, like men's hockey, like ice hockey team. Like in the Olympics and everything, and they were like all like college kids against a bunch of professionals and everything. It's a really good movie. Very
I've
inspirational.
I've
So
just noted that down. I've noted it down. That's going to be something I'll look at after we finish this conversation. So if you recommend it, I'm expecting good things now.
okay.
If you could spend the day with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Sir Alex Ferguson.
A very, very good choice. Best thing you've ever learned in your life, whether that's across your life as general or as a coach?
Um, that I mean, I think the biggest thing is happiness trumps anything, and I think I live that. I had other opportunities where I probably could have, made like just kind of been in a situation different than my own. And honestly, at the end of the day, I'm doing something I love every day, and I feel like I never have to work a day because I am enjoying myself. So I think that's just the biggest thing, just to kind of come to terms with.
I love that. What a great quote and takeaway. Just I'm noting that because I love the way that you said that then. What is your number one fear?
Ooh, complacency.
I like it. I like it. Um, if you had to describe your team mentality in one word, what would it be?
Like our overall, like from um team mentality would be just gritty, like tough teams to play, and yeah, I mean, I would just say keep it to one word, gritty.
I like that. That's the kind of teams which I like and always want my team to be. So if we're not looking as good on the ball that we should be, we're getting in and we're fighting. And if we go 1-0 down, I want us to come back 1-1. If we go 2-1
Yeah,
down, I want to be 2-2. That's the type of team which I like,
yeah.
regardless of
We're
our
we're we're
style.
not the we're not the biggest team, we're not the fastest team, but we will outwork you, that's for sure.
I love that. One book you could recommend.
Ooh, book I can recommend. I really like Abby Wambach's book. I think it's called Forge or something. I liked her book. There's also another good one from a leadership standpoint called The Captain's Class, and it's a bunch of
Mm,
just different captains of different sports, and that was a really good read as well a few years ago. So I would say those two right now that are kind of like fresh in my mind at least.
I like it. I like it. Your number one top tip for any coach?
Never get tired of the boring little details of being a coach, and just I mean kind of what our discussion was, never be afraid to kind of be open to saying yes and learning something different, even as a little bit out of your comfort zone and maybe your expertise level or understanding of things. No, it'll pay off for sure.
I like that. And the final quick fire question one I got for you, right, is what does reflection mean to you?
Reflection means to me just kind of having an understanding that not all the answers will appear in the moment, and just if you take the time just to kind of sit back and kind of just let things kind of come to and understand things, it'll kind of all start to make a little bit more sense. And yeah, no, I mean, reflection to me, and it's funny, I can't really probably put it completely into words, but no, I think it's a huge element, especially into being a coach, and just having a better understanding of what you might need, but also what everyone else around you might need. So,
I love that, and I think that wraps up this fantastic second episode, which I've been able to record with yourself, which I really appreciate. And it's been great to certainly have this conversation from the first time that we met to where we're at now, and to listen in terms of how you've grown and developed from being a student and your last role into what you're doing now, into sort of getting a feel into what your outlook towards the future is as well, and seeing this almost journey and being along with it. Alongside you, right, where I get to talk
mm,
about how you've grown and what you're doing over there and your jobs in America and and being hundreds of miles away but being part of it, right, is somewhat exciting at the same time. But it's been great to have this conversation with you, and I felt like we've only just started to touch the surface as this conversation
mhm,
was elaborating as we got on. But there's been so many different things which I've taken away from you. I put timestamps on and little notes which I've really wrote down, and I think for me, every time I have these conversations, is I get to learn and enjoy what I'm listening to rather than always being the host of it. So when I get to sit back and listen to you, and I know I've had such a great interviewee in front of me, which is you. I know that makes my job all the time easier. So when you say you don't work a day in your life, sitting back for the last hour and a half and going, wow, that was a quick hour and a half of my Saturday night, right?
Yeah, it
Has
was.
absolutely flown by. So, Kate, I really do appreciate it. And as always, you're welcome to come on anytime that you want to. And I've got a few ideas to float your way, which is from the things you've said as we started speaking. So all blame is on you for that one, by the way, right? But I really appreciate it. And it's been great to catch up with you. And I hope you have a great rest of your weekend in terms of what's to come.
Thank you, Luca. Yeah, no, it was great to be back on. Yeah, I know I look forward to you grilling me with more ideas. No, it's always
I,
a great talking with you and kind of there's a lot to learn from you as well. And obviously like things like you stumped me with your systems and tactical and framework question and all that. So that's something that I'll definitely give a think on. And no, I mean it's great.
well, I love it. And I look forward to talking to you soon. But have a good weekend and thank you again.
Thank you, Luca.
No worries. See you soon. Bye.
See ya.
But yeah, we try to be that group that can help be there for the players as a three, because I think you mentioned earlier, you want to have different characters in the changing room. You want to have different personalities. You don't want the same kind of people because you're not going to be able to move forward. If you've got 10 people and they all agree the same things, you're going to get to a point in time where actually you're going to become unstuck. You need that one person to actually be like, nah, I don't agree with that. Or actually, we should try this. And I think that's why the huddle works, is we're all quite different as human beings. And I think you need three different people in there, because some players will naturally gravitate towards me and my personality, but equally some might go to the other two, and that's absolutely fine.